Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Lunchtime Learning. It's a special one today because I saw a product, and I don't normally do this, that really caught my eye, and actually I'm really excited to see where it goes. And as you can see, welcome to Bryan Mansell from Gazeal. It is Gazeal that have done it. It is the surveys that they're going to start providing to sellers, and I wanted to get a better understanding of what it's all about to help agents out there. And more importantly, I think to help the consumer and to help sellers and to help buyers. I think the current system's been broken. I think it's got worse since I was an agent 40 years ago. And I don't think anything's changed. And with all the technology that's out there, days on market seems to be considerably longer now than it has been. So when I saw Gazeal survey, it definitely piqued my interest. And I thought, who better to get on than yourself, Brian, to talk about it. So um, just I'm a consumer.
Yeah,
I've got absolutely no idea um, about surveys. I've got absolutely no idea, to be honest, about the whole process. And that's what I find to be a lot of people.
yeah,
And I take it as an example. My girlfriend, when she was looking to sell, didn't have a clue what questions she should be asking her agent, how
yeah,
to get her sale through a lot quicker.
yeah,
And I'm convinced she's not the only person out there because we move so frequently.
yeah.
So please, if you're kind enough to give me an overview, and if it's okay with you, I just ask you a few questions.
Yeah, no, happy to. Basically, the recommendation that we have as your estate agent, Mr. Brown, is that we fully understand the right strategy to market your home from the very beginning. And that includes not just how we present it to market, but also we fully understand, both of us, the correct condition of your home before we bring it to market. Now, there's a number of benefits to you for us doing that. Firstly, this is not something that is going to cost you any money to do to come onto the market, but it's ever so important that we fully understand and appreciate the full internal as well as external condition of the home so we can get you the very best price with the correct strategy aligned with it. Have you ever had any experience before, Mr. Brown, when you bought the property? Did you find, did the buyer have a survey on your house when they bought it?
The buyer did have a survey. Then they showed me the survey, and it was about 43 pages. And on the survey, it was like loads of, well, maybe you need this, maybe you don't need this, maybe you do need this, maybe. So, in all honesty, it was a load of bullshit.
Yeah,
And they were sitting on the fence.
yeah.
They then renegotiated because there were a couple of things that they weren't happy with.
Yeah, and I'm assuming, and forgive me for doing so, that that was done during the sale once you were off the market and leading towards exchange of contracts.
Yeah, very much so. In fact, it took about 6 weeks of a survey to actually be booked in, which was very frustrating.
Well, this is one of the major problems that we have with this moving process in England, and that's exactly why, as your agent, the recommendation is that we tackle this right now at the very beginning, so that we can go into the sale process, the marketing stage, and the transaction stage fully aware of what may come down the line, so we can be transparent. Which essentially means that the benefit is that we're going to be able to negotiate on our terms, under our control, together, you and I, right now for a prospective buyer, rather than get surprised halfway through the system when you have very limited options available other than saying no and resetting the whole process, which will obviously have a detriment back. What would happen to your situation if 6 weeks down the line you had to renegotiate or your buyer walked away? What difficulties would that put you under?
Well, I would lose the property that I want to buy. My son's going to a particular school, and we've got a place in there potentially. If I can't show that I'm in that area, then they could say you can't have your place. Well, that's what they've told me.
Yeah. So I'm assuming, again, forgive me for assuming, but I'm assuming that that's not a place you want to be, right? We're far better getting this out the way much earlier so that you and I can get a full understanding of the condition of your home so we can then sit back together again, maybe in the home or maybe in my office, and go through the right strategy to tackle this. Because if we do find things in the survey that require attention, we're far better off fully understanding that at the very beginning, maybe even getting the correct quotations for potential repairs, which we can also share with buyers to show that we're transparent and we're serious. And
100%.
obviously, most of the time, when buyers do renegotiate, it's based on estimates from surveyors, not actual physical quotes, which are often 3 to 4 times lower than those estimates. So having this survey done now is going to potentially save you from the uncertainty and the risk of that, but potentially thousands of pounds off your price of your home. That
Yeah.
my job to protect. How does that sound?
It sounds good, and I've got a couple of questions off the back of that. You're not the only agent that's come in today, Brian. Actually, you're third.
Yeah,
The other agent hasn't mentioned that to me as well,
yeah,
um, which by the sounds of things is quite scary. But they've also to mention to me that they do it for 1% less than what you said.
yeah,
Um, so I'll be curious to know what you think about that. And then the other question I've got is, potentially because of my situation, I can't wait that long. I'm not sure. Can you advise me how long it would take to get a surveyor in, how long it would take, and what about, if it does need a lot of work,
yeah.
then, I'm not going to be able to get my son into that school anyway.
Sure. Well, let's tackle those. There seems to be three questions there, and if you're happy, I'll tackle the second one in terms of how long it takes. So, if you were, for example, happy to proceed today, then I can have the full survey report done, dusted, in your hands within 14 days.
Okay, thank you.
Being very mindful, obviously, of the fact that you are under certain time constraints. But this is more about you being able to demonstrate to your onward purchase that you're in a dependable position, that you're ready to go, and that you're taking it very seriously. So I'm sure by taking these actions, we'll happily pass that on to your purchase so that they feel comfortable that you are the right buyer for them. So I think we can put your mind at rest and make sure we focus on getting these timescales met so your son can enter the school in the right within the right term. So the reason that you haven't heard from other agents about this is pretty simple. We're the only approved agent in this area that has this opportunity. So we work with a third-party business called Gazeal, who have organized this particular type of survey called a home insights report, a home insights survey. And essentially, this is going to give you, as we've already discussed, a full picture of the condition of your home, which we can then put the right price on. Also, they'll give you a choice because there could be some recommendations in that survey that you might wish to address yourself, which I'll guide you through, which could actually have a material impact in bettering the value that we get for you on the property. But I stand by my earlier point. The most critical point here is that because the other agents aren't authorized and don't have access to this, that gives me quite a unique position to be in with you to help you move much more safely through this process, looking after your interests, and most of all, protecting the price that we negotiate that you finally accept. I'm a big believer that the price that you agree with your buyer is the price you receive when you move. So you can
Okay.
confidently go through the transaction knowing that whatever price we've agreed is the price that you're going to see in the bank at the end of the day.
Okay. So my mate in the pub,
Mm.
he's he said to me about because actually he sold a property in Scotland,
Yeah,
and I think he was telling me that he has a home report then.
yeah, home
Um,
condition report.
but
Yeah,
the home condition report is very different sometimes to what the agent values the property at. So, is there going to be a huge differential, and how's my buyer potentially going to find the difference
sure.
between that price and, the price of valuer? That will be a concern for me on the survey.
Well, the good news is that I can remove that concern right now for you in that you and your estate agent, myself, we are in control of the marketing price for the property. Putting a valuation, an exact point on a property is, I suppose, the word is reckless because ultimately a property is worth what someone's prepared to pay for it and what the market conditions will help us get. This is about being transparent, which ultimately means that you're likely to get a better price for it. As I mentioned before, you're not facing, unrealistic reduction penalties later on down the line. We can deal with that now. But ultimately, getting you the very best price is down to you and I and our strategy for marketing. And we do that once we have a full picture of the property and what we're facing together.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And you talked about agents getting approval for the home insight survey.
Yeah.
How does that agent get approval?
Well, we're lucky enough as an agency to have an approval through our process with a company called Gazeal, who are looking after all of this. And that's a tough thing to get, actually, because Gazeal don't work with every single estate agent. They don't work with the larger corporates, for example. So as a strong independent in the area, we applied for this application a while back now, and we've been lucky enough to get it. So we've been the chosen agent in this location to actually offer you this service. This is not something that our competitors, the other agents you may have seen, can simply pick up the phone and order this type of survey. This does not exist with a standard surveyor who, as I may have mentioned earlier, the standard surveyor will do a survey for you off the shelf a level 3, level 2, level 1, and you have that report. The challenge with that is that report will have to be paid for by you immediately. Secondly, it is no use to the buyer. It can give them some insight, but the buyer can't rely on that information themselves in their purchase. So often what we find is that buyer then has to incur an additional cost to have their own survey done, which could conflict with the type of information you've been given, which actually causes more problems down the line. The benefit of our insight survey is that the survey, once it's done, if you remember, you're not paying for it up front at all. The agency will take care of that. But more importantly, once the survey is produced and shared with potential buyers, they can completely rely on the content of that survey because they also have insurance with the surveyor that's conditioned the report. So much so that I'm pleased to say that the buyer can actually engage directly with the surveyor when they're considering offering on your property to get the comfort that they know it's exactly the same as if they'd ordered their own survey. They have the same recourse, as do you, of course.
And what about their lender? Would their lender be happy with a survey?
Yeah, no, we don't provide that for the lender simply because of the valuation aspect of it. We wanted to keep control of the value and the potential sale price between us, you and I, and the market, which we know. Lenders have a very different view on a property. They simply make what they call an automatic valuation of the property. And a surveyor coming around is there really to see that the property exists and that it's not way off the market in terms of price wise. One of the elements that we will use to help defend that survey, so to protect you from potential down valuations, of course, is when the surveyor comes to produce the market appraisal, the market valuation, sorry, we can share the survey with him as well, or with them as well. So to give them more confidence to price the property correctly.
Okay, so there's no charge to me at all.
No, there's a charge to you on completion. So our strategy would be that we would include the cost of the survey, which will be around about £750, including VAT. We'll include that in our negotiations with the buyer.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, Mr. Brown, you fully understand that if you decide at any point that you don't want to sell your property and you are going to come off the market, maybe to make some improvements, then the cost of the survey you'll need to bear. But you'll have 6 months to repay that. So it's a pretty good opportunity for you. And it's not a credit agreement. So it's not affecting your credit if you decide that you need to get more finance on the property.
Okay, and I can pay that in installments or I
You
have to
can
pay
pay
it
it however you like. Yeah, it's not a loan. There's no interest on it. So it's simply the headline price is the price that you'd pay within 6 months. You can pay that whenever you want in however format you wish.
Okay, so my concern will be that this is a relatively new product.
Yeah.
Have you got any case studies to show where it's worked at all yet?
Yeah, we have 4 actually that were done in the last couple of days that were instigated the week before, which I'm happily connect you to the relevant people there if you need some help on that. But I think directly you can talk to the surveyor prior to any engagement on your property and get complete comfort from them. In fact, I can send you some information if you like, or provide you with some information on that so you can read up at your leisure. But to give you some additional assurance, these surveys are conducted by the Residential Property Surveyors Association. So this is an accreditation that chartered surveying companies have. You may be familiar with that. You may be familiar with the RICS, which is the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. These are 2 membership organizations that operate within the sector. And chartered companies can join either one of them or both. And quite a lot of the surveyors that we have under the jurisdiction of the RPSA are also members of the RICS.
Okay, and if something comes up on the survey, like there's damp maybe, or there's some woodwork, wood rot, or maybe they found some subsidence, do they recommend builders at all to get in or companies that will come in?
Well, they won't recommend particular firms. You're free to do that with me. I can help you recommend. I can recommend some good contractors. Because obviously we've done this many times before to help you should that situation arise. But you're in complete control of the process from when the survey results are in.
Okay. And what about if the surveyor finds stuff that effectively comes up with too many things that are wrong and I can't actually sell my property?
Well, then they would need to be addressed. And I think the point here, and it's a valid one, is I would much rather you are aware of that at the very beginning, not, as I mentioned, 6 weeks, 6, 8, 6, 7 months into the sale, where you have a lot of costs that you're going to have to cover off with your solicitors, mortgage applications on your purchase, and so on and so on. I'd much rather protect you from that possibility by finding this out now. It's absolutely critical for us to know this early.
Okay, so that's about the surveys. One of the things that you spoke about earlier when you were discussing the property, you talked about reservation agreement as well.
Yeah.
And that's not something I've ever heard of before. I've heard of it on the new build side, but I've
Sure.
not heard of it when it comes to more traditional residential sales.
Yeah.
Uh, would you
I'm
be
not surprised. Yeah,
kind enough to explain what that's all about?
of
Because I
course.
think that's very, very rare. And any time I've ever spoken to an agent, they look at me as if I'm mad.
Are we still role playing or not? You come back
We
to that.
are, and this is great. And don't
Okay,
say I'm mad,
fantastic.
and don't say you're mad anyway.
Yeah, no. Well, Mr. Brown, I mentioned the reservation because, again, it's another firm recommendation. Are you familiar with the recent announcement by the government a week last Friday of the reforms that are going to be happening in the property market?
Yeah, and they've been talking about those reforms for a long, long time. So
Yeah.
I believe it when I see it.
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, we obviously, as an agent in the industry, have an expectation, and we are pushing. The industry is pushing for change in a positive way, and we are a firm believer that the process. Are you familiar with the process of gesundering? What that actually means?
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yes.
What
Yeah.
does it mean in your mind?
That I get an offer on my property and somebody decides that they don't want to offer that amount. And when it comes to exchange, they drop their price by a certain figure.
Yeah, yeah. And again, much like we've already discussed with the survey, the assumption I'm going to make right now, which I think is pretty safe, is that you want to avoid that at all costs. How do you feel about gazumping on this? On the flip side of gazundering, you have gazumping, which are you familiar with gazumping, the
Yeah,
term?
yes, I am, and sadly, I've been involved with that. So yeah, it's not a nice feeling, and I ideally would be honouring.
Yeah.
So in fact, on my first ever property that I was selling, I had somebody who wanted to pay £12,000 more,
Okay.
and I kept with existing people.
Well, that's, as you mentioned, the right word, honourable. And I think most people will share that view. I mean, it's how we like to go about our lives. So, congratulations on your honour. And I'm sure your original buyer was very grateful had they known that you turned down a bigger opportunity. But from
Right,
my
they were told.
They were told. Right. So, from my perspective as a professional and ethical agent, my attitude is that outlawing gazumping and gazundering is a high priority for not only the industry, but actually, I think my views are shared by the public as well. And that's certainly the feedback that the government has had, which has led to the reforms announcing that there's going to be a binding agreement in place to protect. You mentioned Scotland earlier on. This is exactly the same style in Scotland, but actually, it's the same process the whole world. And reservation agreements, whilst they might not be known to you, are in use, are practically very common in different sectors of the property market, such as auctions and such as new homes, as you've mentioned. But what we're lucky enough to do, again, through our association with Gazeal, is give you, as the homeowner, the control I mentioned before, to give you the chance to make a commitment to your buyer at the point you accept their offer. The buyer, as you have experienced before, is going to ask you to come off the market, Mr. Brown, okay? And essentially remove your property from the eyes of everybody else that's potentially out there looking for homes. As your agent, I simply want to make sure that if the buyer is expecting you to do that, that we expect the buyer to do the same thing exactly, so that you're not having to essentially deny yourself potential other opportunities whilst your buyer is free to do whatever they wish. I'm a firm believer in fairness, in the fact that there should be a balance. And if you are going to come off the market, your buyer should do the same. Now, realistically, as an agent, I have very little control over whether that buyer is off the market and not out viewing with my competitors while they're saying they're trying to buy your home. It's a story that I've unfortunately had to experience many, many times. So we use the reservation as a sign of commitment. And essentially, what it means is that you and your buyer, once I've brokered the deal between the two of you, we're going to confirm that in writing in a binding agreement that means you and your buyer stick to the process of the conveyancing, and you do that in good faith. Now, if you then change your mind and you wish not to sell your home, or you do have a change of heart and you do gazump, because some people do, then it is only fair that you compensate the buyer accordingly, because your actions are going to cause them a significant financial loss plus the heartache. But you would only issue this agreement with our advice on the principle that the buyer does exactly the same thing. So if they decide to go off and look at someone else's house, or during the process they decide to be cheeky and trying to lower their offer at the last minute, essentially putting a gun at your head, then they do so with the threat of having to pay you compensation. So if they do go off and decide not to buy your home, you're not going to be out of pocket. And I think that's a very fair process to have. But we must make sure we're fully transparent at the beginning so that your buyer knows what they're entering into and what they're buying.
Okay. What about if a buyer solicitor advises their client not to use it?
Well, that's a great question. And in that situation, we would invite Gazeal to have a conversation with that solicitor, because Gazeal are a legal business. They have solicitors, property experts in their business. And the interesting part of this is that if a buyer's conveyancer is advising them not to sign a legal agreement, we would check as your agent that the buyer's solicitor has actually read it. Our experience is they don't read it, they simply dismiss it, which of course is professionally negligent. Now, in a situation, should that happen, we would invite Gazeal to engage with the buyer's conveyancer to not only give them the comfort of reading the agreement, which once they do, they're very often likely to promote it, because of course they understand their client would potentially lose out on compensation if you change your mind. But more importantly, the agreements that we use indemnify the conveyancers fully. So the conveyancer normally is making that recommendation out of fear that they could be sued if they give someone advice that results in them having to pay a compensation payment, which is not the case with our agreements. That's why, as a business, we've aligned with Gazeal, because they take care of this for us in a very professional way. They're governed by the Competition and Markets Authority, the Office of Fair Trading. They've worked with the Law Society, the Council for Licensed Conveyancers, et cetera, and they're even underwritten by Lloyd's of London. So this is a very professional, independent business that we have carefully chosen to apply to join and be approved. And that's why I bring the recommendation to you today, because I think it's best practice for us.
Thank you. And if I'm in a chain and through
Yeah.
no fault of my own,
Yeah.
say the seller decides to pull out on that,
Yeah.
um, and they haven't signed it, do I then have to compensate my buyer through no fault of my own?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. So you can sleep easy knowing that as long as we have declared that as part of the agreement, it's very, very clear that if you are in a situation where your onward purchase fails through no fault of yours, then you can reset the agreement, you can walk away, but you are not liable for any cost whatsoever or any liability.
And out of curiosity, how many sales with reservations go through compared to um, no reservations?
Well, if you take the entire country,
Yeah.
then far more property sales go through without a reservation than do go through with a reservation. But that goes back to your earlier point that this is relatively new and not fully common across the entire market, which,
Yeah.
as I mentioned, the government are going to correct. Because
Okay.
there are thousands of people, and literally every couple of minutes, every single day, while we've been having this conversation, one disappointed party has been left by another one, and as all the things we talked about earlier on, putting their move in complete jeopardy, and potentially losing a property, let alone the cost they've already had. That's happening every 2 to 3 minutes, every single day, and that's what we want to stamp out.
Okay. Are
But
there
somebody
any?
has to go first, right? And whilst Gazeal are not new, they've been around for a number of years with a very high pedigree, a lot of success. What we are doing as an agent is we are fully aligning with this corrected process to move our clients safely through. At least make you aware of it, so you ultimately decide on how you want to sell your home.
Okay. Are there any other questions, Brian, that I should be asking you that I haven't asked you?
Not really. I think the key thing is, are you absolutely satisfied? You've mentioned to me whilst we've been discussing this and when we chatted on the phone before I came to see you, you mentioned about your onward purchase. You weren't sure if you were going to buy or you might consider vacating to break the chain and rent. Have you had any further thoughts about which route you wish to take?
I'd rather not break the chain, to be honest, thinking about it. So I
Yeah.
don't want the added cost of rental.
Yeah, well, my advice would always be, even if you were considering moving out, particularly in terms of the deal, we state that you are looking to purchase and that is conditional. So that is then in there to protect you. But as for other questions, really, there's a cost issue. So where there's a cost for the reservation agreement, because one of the benefits that we have with Gazeal is that in the event, you're not having to put down physical money to show your commitment. You're essentially signing a handshake. You're signing a bond that says you will pay money to your buyer. And that starts at £2,000, which I'm pretty sure you're comfortable with. But
And
you're
where
not
does that
paying
bond get held?
that £2,000 is not held by anybody because it's not paid by you. So instead of you paying £2,000 into a pot, you're paying £300, which in the event that your move does not take place through no fault of yours is fully refunded to you. So I mentioned before there's zero cost, but your £2,000 is only due if you actually break the agreement that you've signed.
Okay, and that £300, does that go into your client account or Gazeal's client account? Where does that go?
That goes directly to Gazeal. It doesn't. We have no involvement as an agency with any monies that transpire. That is completely independent, and that is fully disclosed to you before you sign the agreement.
Okay, lovely. I know it's relatively new, and I know you mentioned that you've had four people that have taken out so far. Um, has the surveys been done? Were they done within the 14 days, as as promised, or is it too early to say because it's just
Yeah,
started?
it's a bit too early to say, but all four of them that were booked in yesterday when we first launched, the first four were all contacted and arranged during the first 24 hours of the booking. One of them is actually taking place on Monday, so the survey will be back by middle of next week. So we obviously are very importantly managing everybody's expectations for the purposes of marketing homes. The agreement that we have with our surveyors is that they will have the finished report with you no later than 14 days. But obviously, if they can get access to the home early enough, then of course we'll bring them in as quickly as possible to have it done as soon as possible.
Okay, so would you be kind enough to summarize what the aim is of Gazeal surveys, please?
Yeah, the Gazeal surveys, the two aims are to protect sellers and speed up the transaction, and also to give buyers much more critical information that they use to make a decision to purchase at the very beginning of the transaction before they involve themselves in high levels of cost with their conveyancers. This is something that is, to me and to us as an industry, I think a major step forward. Because, with all respect, Mr. Brown, you're not going to sell a car without knowing if it works or not. You might clean your car and hoover it, but actually, if the engine's faulty, then you're not going to get the price you're expecting. So you would have an MOT or you'd have a service on that car. We see the same thing with a property. It's vitally important for the owner and the owner's agent, who's your professional advisor, to know exactly what it is we're selling, so we can price and strategize accordingly. So, in terms of summary, it's an upfront survey that's very detailed. It's not going to cost you any money up front whatsoever. So there's no barrier to entry. It can be used fully by your buyer under insurance. And the information that the surveyor collects can be used by the buyer's conveyancer to answer a number of inquiries. So therefore, that alone will speed up the transaction. Another major benefit is you're protecting your price. And that's the critical point for us, to make sure that what we negotiate for you and what you're happy to accept is the price you get. At the moment, the chance of that actually being the same price at the end with any other agent is very, very low because of negotiations we've talked about and you've experienced yourself.
Lovely. Well, I didn't expect to be role playing this afternoon. So,
Neither did I.
thank you. But actually, I think it's great because I think any agent that's watching this will get a better understanding. You're going to get all these questions that are going to be asked by your seller, and
Yeah.
actually to have somebody who's very experienced is able to answer every question is fantastic. And actually, on a serious note, professionals practice before they play. So I'm sure when you go in front of sellers, you are going to get asked loads and loads of questions. And I think you've got a little training video here that
Yeah, probably have actually. Yeah.
Brian has been kind enough to share. But whatever you'll be doing, you should be practicing anyway. So if people want to get know more, Brian, how do they get hold of you, please?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, we're a pretty big business now. We've been going for a long time, but I've always remained very, very accessible and open to any agents that want to have a conversation. So you're very welcome to DM me. You can access me through the website, LinkedIn, or you can email me at brian.mansell@gazeal.co.uk.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to see where it goes. For me, it's an absolute no-brainer. Agents' job should be trying to smooth the process, take the stress out of it. And if this can resolve all the challenges up front, and save time, bring days on market down considerably, then I'm definitely all for it. So thank you all for listening, watching. Reach out to Brian, reach out to me. I'm curious to know if you have started to use it, how it's all going. And please, if you do like the podcast, like it, share it. And until the next time, have a good one, everybody. Thank you very much.